Oh, hello everybody. We're in a bit of a different location today. I'm in my corner with my books and my other stuff. And that's because I'm going to do a kind of different video today. And that's because this is going to be a basic YouTube video, very basic indeed. So what I'm going to do today is try and answer some of the most popular search terms of sex education on Google. So you know when you go to Google and you start typing and it suggests what the search should complete as? Well, those are like the most popular search terms. So, for example, if I typed in who is Andy, and it comes up with Warhol. Let's see if I put a H in. No. Ah, there we go. Eventually. Oh look, it does come up with me. Okay, so you get the idea. Basically, what I'm going to do is start typing in questions about sex education. There's going to be suggestions coming up, and then I try to answer them. Let's start off with, is sex education compulsory in the UK? No, not yet actually. In England and Wales, it will be compulsory in all schools in 2020. We don't quite know what's going to be on the curriculum yet, so it could be all sorts of things. Hopefully it's going to include LGBT and gender awareness, but also include relationships education. I think that's really important actually. Relationships education, especially consent and what constitutes consent. So what else we've got down here? Is sex education effective? I absolutely think it's effective. A good example of this is that in countries where we have compulsory sex education or comprehensive sex education, or indeed comprehensive compulsory sex education, there is a much lower rate of teenage pregnancies. There's also less STIs, lower rates of domestic abuse. So there's so many things which sex education can focus on and is so useful to young people. Okay, let's try when is sex education taught in schools? Well, in the UK it is taught to 10-11-year-olds, which is year 6 or whatever that is in Scotland. In England and Wales it's year 6. At that point they don't tend to tell you about actual sex, but they do tell you about puberty and periods and other things like that. Well, they tell girls about periods. Hopefully they'll start to tell boys about periods as well. They should tell everybody about everything. Then everybody knows, don't they? You don't get this gender divide which you currently have. But sex education with safe sex and pregnancy and all that kind of thing is taught around ages 13, 14, which is usually year 9. The problem, of course, is that it's taught by normal sports and science teachers rather than trained sex educators. Not all the time, but often. Interesting one here, number 3. When is sex education coming to Netflix? Now that is actually quite interesting. Netflix have got a new series out in a couple of weeks' time. I think, off the top of my head, it's the 11th of January, so just a week's time in fact. 11th of January. It's a new series called Sex Education, and apparently, according to the people who've seen previews of it, it's really good. So if you've got Netflix, then give it a watch. Let's try, how does sex education... So this kind of follows on from what I was saying before, but yes, how does sex education affect teenage pregnancy? Well, it affects it in 2 ways. Firstly, sex education tells you about contraception, so about condoms and the pill. So obviously if more people are using some sort of contraception, then less young girls are going to get pregnant. But the other thing that sex education does is teach you about the responsibilities you have. So it will teach you, about consent and the age of consent, more to the point. So here in the UK, the age of consent is 16. So if young people are taught about the age of consent, then of course they're less likely to have sex before the age of consent because they know at least that it is illegal. Not that anybody under the age of 16 would be prosecuted if they were having sex with other people under the age of 16, but that's another matter. Okay, so how about why does sex education need to be taught? Well, for all the reasons I've been going over, here's an interesting one. Why is sex education not taught in schools? Well, there's all sorts of reasons why your school may not teach sex education. If you're not in a Western country, then there may be no syllabus, there may be no resources to teach sex education. The teachers may not have any knowledge about what to teach. Not that unlikely. But even if you are in the Western world, even here in the UK, it's not compulsory. And often, if you're in faith schools, or if you're in academies or other schools which aren't government state schools, then it's not always the case that sex education is put on the curriculum by the head teachers. Or you might get a very different sex education to people who do go to state schools. And that's particularly true for private schools and things like that, where parents have a bit more say over what gets taught, and parents say, well, actually, I want to teach my child sex education at home. Now, of course, you have all the same problems there. Unless they are, of course, sex educators, they're not going to be trained in sex education. So they're not going to have all the knowledge, all the information, unless they go and do a lot of research. But, you know, that is a concern of parents. Some parents want to teach their child how they think sex education should be taught, not necessarily how they think the school's going to be teaching it. Why is sex education bad? It isn't bad. Under no circumstances is sex education bad. Unless it's bad sex education. Then it's bad, I suppose. Yeah. The only reason why sex education would be bad if it is bad sex education. How about where can I find sex education resources? I've almost typed that one in myself, but you know, where can I find sex education resources? Let me tell you. Now, other than this channel and channels like Hannah Witten and Sexplainations, there's some great resources at Sexplain UK, which I shall link to in the description. Also, Bish. That's some great sex education resources there. And talking about Bish, the people that run Bish, there's two people called Meg-John and Justin. That's Meg-John and Justin, who they have a podcast which I absolutely suggest you check out. I think it's called Meg-John and Justin, where they talk about sex education and how it affects young people and how it affects society and what it's good for and the kind of things that we take for granted. Absolutely suggest you check that out. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, then why not give it a thumbs up? You can do that just down below. Why not leave some of your sex education questions in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. I make videos every single week, so don't forget to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.